Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to XJW Diaries. My name is Justin. So, the majority of Jehovah's Witnesses were born and raised as Jehovah's Witnesses. They don't know any different. But for those of you that have watched some of my older videos, you guys know that I was not fully raised as a witness. My family didn't come into the witnesses until I was around 11 years old. So, in other words, I went all the way up through 5th grade as just your normal, everyday, worldly kid. Now, being a kid as a witness has its challenges, a lot of them. But being a kid transitioning into the witnesses has some challenges on its own. So in this video, I like to bring some light to some of those challenges, and in a sense also give a voice to that younger 11-year-old me who was too afraid to speak up when all these things were going on. So the challenges of getting ingrained into the witness community as a child kind of came in waves. So I'll go through them one by one. So the first wave was the changes and challenges at home. Now, obviously, there's no more birthdays and no more Christmas. Those things were now considered bad. And as I think back on things, it's kind of interesting that even in those early stages of getting integrated into the witnesses, thought control already starts coming into play. I had to learn that even the thought of wishing that I had something for Christmas, or when it came to birthdays, even feeling excited about turning a new age was now a bad thought. Now, beyond just birthdays and holidays, there was a lot of other things that used to be just fine, but were now considered bad. And all of this was very confusing because some of these things I still really liked, such as Harry Potter. Back then, it was just a fantasy book, just a book with this world that sparked my imagination. But as we got into the witnesses, Harry Potter and anything else that had a magic element to it was now bad. And because I hadn't learned at that point to not like those things yet, I personally felt bad. And I suppose that's another area of stress for a child growing up as a witness, is that the Watchtower has so many rules and regulations about what you're allowed to like, what you're not allowed to like, what you're allowed to think about, and what you're not allowed to think about, that it really can make a good kid feel like a bad kid. Another big change at home was time. Before being a witness, Saturday mornings were full of fun. Me and my siblings would rush downstairs to watch the new episodes of Pokemon, Dexter's Lab, and Mega Man. If you're a 90s kid, you know what's up. Saturdays were just a day of fun. It was just a day to be a kid. But when we became witnesses, Saturdays became something different. Saturdays were no longer a day to sleep in and watch cartoons of giant turtles fighting dragons. Now Saturdays were about getting up early, putting on a full suit and tie, and going out in service. And the extra time requirements weren't just on Saturday. Back then, there were 3 meetings every week, and each of those meetings also required preparation, which required more time. Now, one of the first things I noticed as I started to get around some of the other witness kids was that these kids, they weren't regular kids. They behaved and they spoke almost like adults. And it wasn't until we got deeper into the witnesses that I started to understand why. And that's because being a witness doesn't leave much room for just being a kid. And what time was left for being a kid had a lot more restrictions on it. And all these changes weren't just impacting us kids either. My parents were impacted as well. And I suppose now's a good time to bring up the fact that I was raised in a split family home. So I had my mom's house and I had my dad's house. And that added complications as well. Now on my dad's side, they were never witnesses. And as a child, I would usually go to my dad's house every other weekend. And then during holiday breaks and summer breaks, I would stay there for longer. So I spent most of my time at my mom's house. But interestingly enough, things at my dad's house were also impacted by the witnesses. For example, my dad now had to deal with the fact that he had to interact with me differently, or maybe even not see me at all during holidays and birthdays. So it's kind of interesting that the Watchtower is able to get their tentacles into 2 different households, even though one of the households had nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Even as a child, I could see that all these rules brought on by the witnesses was very invasive. And I could see some of the frustration that my parents had to deal with by having this outside organization invade their home, tell them how to run their home, and how to raise their kids. Another area of life that was heavily impacted by the Watchtower was school. Because remember, I went all the way up through 5th grade being just like everybody else. So that previous year was just a normal year. But 6th grade, everything was going to be different. Because when you're a witness, school isn't just a place where you go to learn. No, that'd be too easy. No, when you're a witness, school also becomes a place where you are to show bravery. And for me, that started on the very first day of school. During that first day, me and my family went to meet my brand new teacher. And during that meeting, my mom handed the teacher a pamphlet that the Watchtower specifically made for teachers. Maybe some of you know what I'm talking about. And in the pamphlet, it was basically saying that you have a student who is in your class who is one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is all the stuff that they can do and can't do and what they believe. And of course, the pamphlet has a part where they can ask for a Bible study because, as you know, witnesses never miss opportunity for recruitment. And this is where I have to give some credit to my 6th grade teacher. Her name was Anne-Marie Rutt, one of my favorite elementary school teachers, because she handled having me as a witness in her class incredibly well. Because for starters, she never drew attention to anything that I was doing differently. And she allowed me to cope with things the way that worked best for me. For example, one of the many challenges that witness kids have to face when going to public school, specifically in the United States, is having to deal with the flag salute. Since witnesses do not believe in saluting the flag, witness kids are instructed to stand there respectfully, but do not say the salute and do not put your hand on your heart. And this is a challenge that comes up every single morning. Now, the first day this came up, I was mortified. Because again, at the Kingdom Hall, they're asking you to be brave. This is a test of your faith. But when you're there, in that position, with all your classmates, and you just want to be normal like everybody else, it's incredibly challenging. And it's a very heavy weight to put on a kid. And that's another aspect about being a witness, is that they really do put adult-sized challenges on the shoulders of children and expect them to deal with it like an adult. But here's the thing, I wasn't an adult. I was just an 11-year-old child. I was still getting Happy Meals. Furthermore, being a witness was still brand new to me at that age. And yet all the rules of being a witness took effect right away. So on my first day, I froze. During the flag salute, I just pretended like there was something lost inside of my desk. And over the next few days, I had developed other ways of being able to deal with it. Sometimes I would pretend like I had dropped something, or that I needed to tie my shoes, or that I needed to get something out of my backpack, which was in the back of the classroom. I wanted to do anything but stand there awkwardly, not saluting the flag as everybody stared at me. Well, my teacher noticed that, and one day she pulled me aside and she said that she had read the pamphlet that she had gotten, and she understood that I wasn't allowed to salute the flag, and that if I needed to be excused from the classroom, I could do that instead. Now, at that time, I was very embarrassed because I was told at the Kingdom Hall that I was supposed to stand there strong and proud and brave, and I just couldn't do it. And I felt bad about the fact that I couldn't do it. So from that day forward, I tried my very best, every single strategy I can think of, to make sure that I was not in that classroom during the flag salute. And that was every single day during that school year. So frustrating. Usually, I would ask to use the restroom just before the morning announcement started. If I was being dropped off at school that day, I would walk incredibly slowly from the drop-off point, taking the longest route possible. That way, by the time I got to my class, the flag salute would have already been done with. Birthdays and holidays were also big stressors, because as witnesses, you're not allowed to sing happy birthday or have a slice of the birthday cake. And during holiday assemblies or holiday art activities, you have to sit out. The way I interacted with my classmates also changed, because again, when you're a witness, you're encouraged to distance yourself from quote-unquote worldly people. So the previous school year, my friends were just that, my friends. But as we became witnesses, those same friends became my friends at school. And that at school subtitle put them in a sort of secondary class. This meant that I was not going to be able to go to their house or do after school activities with them. These were my friends at school and only at school. But outside of that, I was encouraged to make friends at the Kingdom Hall. And that brings me to my next subject, the meetings. Now, before becoming a witness, church and religion didn't really play that big of a role in my childhood. Every now and then we would get up early on a Sunday and go to church, usually on Christmas or Easter. But we never really belonged to a specific church, and attendance was never a requirement. Now, the one thing all these churches had in common was that they had a separate Sunday school for the kids. And in this Sunday school, us kids would do art projects and sing songs, and do activities to learn about the Bible in a way that's appropriate for kids. One of the churches we went to even had different classrooms for younger kids, older kids, and teens. And so even though getting up early on a Sunday and having to put on uncomfortable clothes to go to church wasn't the most appealing idea in the world, it was at least worth it when we got there because it ended up being kind of fun. But the Kingdom Hall was anything but fun. And again, as kids, we were expected to act like adults in a lot of ways as witnesses. So even back then, I knew that when I was putting on my suit and tie, getting dressed before the meeting, that suit wasn't just an outfit. That suit was an entire persona that I was expected to put on each and every time I walked through those Kingdom Hall doors. And there was definitely no Sunday school at the Kingdom Hall. Again, witnesses are putting adult-sized expectations onto children. And this also extends to the subject matter of the meetings. So no matter how scary or how violent or how sexually explicit the topic being discussed is, the children are required to sit there and listen and pay attention exactly like the adults. Looking back, that's just crazy. As a parent, you should be able to have some amount of control over what subject matter your kids are exposed to at what age. But that control just doesn't exist for witnesses. Now, interacting with my witness peers was always a challenge for me. Even into my adult years, it was a challenge. Because when you're talking to other witnesses, you have to be so careful about everything you say and anything that you express about yourself. I learned really quick at that young age that I needed to self-edit my speech each and every time I talked to another witness. I also learned at that young age that there were certain questions that were not allowed to be asked and certain answers that can never be questioned. And so for me, since I was already a pretty introverted kid, that self-editing and that fear of saying something that might quote unquote stumble somebody, that just caused me to hardly speak at all. Now, if there's one thing going to meetings at that age forced me to learn, it was to endure. In the earlier years of being a witness, we still had 3 meetings per week. So that's 3 meetings lasting anywhere from 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours long, where you're having to sit there as a child and be still and be silent while listening to subjects that most of the time don't really interest you and are going way over your head because they are really directed at an adult audience. And that's just the regular meetings. Then you have the conventions where you're stuck in this large auditorium where the sound is not even very clear, but you must listen to talk after talk after talk for 6 to 8 hours a day, 3 days in a row, and you better not fall asleep. So now let's talk about service, because that was without a doubt the most challenging aspect of being a witness during that first year. Growing up, I was a pretty shy kid. So the idea of going up to some random person's door on a Saturday morning to try to get them to join a religion that I wasn't even fully familiar with yet was terrifying to me. And this is another area where guilt and shame comes in. Because as scary as service was for me as a young kid, I knew that I could not openly express that fear and discomfort. Yet another thing that required me to endure. And just like meetings, service was another area where us kids had the same expectations as adults. We were expected to go out as much as possible, walking the streets wearing a suit and tie, briefcase in hand, knocking on people's doors, and offering them whatever message the Watchtower was requiring us to spread that month, regardless of if that message would be appropriate coming from a child. Looking back, that first year of me getting integrated into the witnesses was probably just as scary and traumatic to my younger self as my first year getting out of the witnesses, getting integrated back into normal society. And in a way that makes sense, because if I had to describe that first year of being a witness in one word, that word would be fear. Because when you're a witness, you learn fear. Your entire worldview changes to something to be fearful of. Before becoming a witness, I wasn't scared of the world. The world was a place of opportunity and adventure. After becoming a witness, the world was this place fit for destruction. As a little kid before the Watchtower entered my life, every now and then I would have a bad dream. I can still remember this one where this giant spider was walking towards me on my bed. And I swear I could feel the weight of that spider walking towards me. It felt so real. And I woke up and I was terrified, but eventually I went back to sleep. Now, after becoming a witness, the nightmares I had, whoa, it's the kind that you're not going back to sleep. You get to just sit up and think about that all night long. I'm sure many of you can relate to the nightmares that you get being in the Watchtower. So I thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for your time. And I would love to hear about some of your experiences of being raised as a witness and some of the challenges that you guys faced. Whether you're fully raised in it, or if you were like me and kind of got into it a little bit later in childhood. I would love to hear some of the things that you guys went through. So please leave a comment if you feel like sharing. And with that, thanks again for watching. Please take it easy on yourselves. Much love to you all.